"We'll end you, lady!" Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison's fist slammed onto the table. Food scattered across the floor. His 3 Marines surrounded the 54-year-old woman like wolves circling wounded prey. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She simply lifted her gray eyes, cold as winter steel, and stared straight through him. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," she said quietly. Morrison laughed. His team laughed. They had no idea they were threatening Commander Margaret Callahan, the woman who had trained half the SEAL snipers hunting terrorists worldwide. The woman who never missed and never forgave. The fluorescent lights of the Joint Special Operations Training Center dining facility buzzed with a low, persistent hum. It was 1847 hours on a Tuesday evening, and the massive room churned with the controlled chaos of 500 military personnel consuming their evening meal. Commander Margaret Callahan carried her tray to a small table in the corner. She moved with the economy of motion that comes from decades of training, each step deliberate, each movement purposeful. Her uniform was a set of unmarked utilities devoid of rank insignia or name tape. The only identifier was a small patch on her left shoulder, crossed rifles over a black circle with the words, "One shot, one kill, one soul," stitched in silver thread beneath. Few recognized the emblem. Those who did knew better than to approach uninvited. She was 54 years old. Her hair, once raven black, now carried streaks of silver that she refused to hide. Her face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent too many hours under harsh suns in unforgiving places. Her hands, as she set down her tray, showed the calluses of 10,000 trigger pulls. To most of the personnel in that facility, she was invisible. A middle-aged woman in an ambiguous uniform, perhaps a civilian contractor, perhaps a logistics officer, certainly no one of consequence. This perception of insignificance was about to become the worst mistake of Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison's career. Morrison spotted her from across the room. He was 32 years old, built like a professional fighter, and possessed the kind of aggressive confidence that came from being the alpha in every room he entered. He was Force Reconnaissance 3rd Battalion, and he wore that identity like armor. "Well, well," he said loud enough to turn heads. "Look what we have here, boys." His fire team fell in behind him. Corporal Ryan Fletcher was the tallest, with a perpetual smirk and a smartphone that seemed permanently attached to his hand. Corporal Marcus Webb was built like a linebacker, all shoulders and intimidation. Lance Corporal Tommy Ortiz was the youngest, barely 23, eager to prove himself worthy of the company he kept. They moved toward Callahan's table with the proprietary swagger of predators approaching prey. She continued eating. A forkful of rice, a piece of grilled chicken. She chewed slowly, methodically, her gaze fixed on the middle distance. "Hey!" Morrison planted himself directly in front of her table. "I'm talking to you." She took another bite. Morrison's jaw tightened. He wasn't accustomed to being ignored. He leaned forward, bracing both hands on her table, his face inches from hers. "What's your deal, lady? You some kind of paper pusher from Fleet Command? Don't you know this is where warriors eat?" Fletcher raised his phone. The small red recording light blinked in the fluorescent glare. Callahan set down her fork. She placed her knife parallel to it, precisely aligned. Only then did she lift her head. Her eyes met Morrison's. They were gray, pale gray like winter ice over deep water. And they held absolutely nothing. No fear, no anger, no recognition of threat. Just an emptiness that seemed to absorb his hostility and reflect nothing back. Morrison felt something shift in his chest, a primitive warning signal that his conscious mind immediately rejected. "You got hearing problems." He pushed harder into her space. "When a staff sergeant asks you a question, you answer. That's how this works." "Actually," Callahan said, her voice quiet and even, "that's not how this works at all." They were the first words she had spoken. Her tone carried the flat, measured cadence of someone who had given orders that ended lives. Morrison blinked. "What did you say to me?" "I said that's not how this works." She returned to her meal, dismissing him with a bite of chicken. "You might want to reconsider your approach." Webb stepped closer, using his bulk to crowd the space. "Staff Sergeant asked you a question, ma'am. Show some respect." Respect is earned, Callahan replied without looking up. Not demanded. Morrison's face flushed red. In 11 years of military service, no one had ever spoken to him like this. Certainly not some middle-aged woman with gray hair and a forgettable face. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded. "Yes." The single word stopped him cold. "You're Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison." Callahan continued, still focused on her meal. "3rd Force Reconnaissance Company. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Syria. Acceptable shooting scores. Mediocre land navigation. Disciplinary flag for excessive aggression during a training exercise last year." She took another bite. "You're exactly who I thought you were." Morrison's team exchanged glances. How did she know all that? "Who the hell are you?" Morrison's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Callahan finally set down her utensils. She looked up at him, those gray eyes unblinking. "I'm the person you should not have chosen to threaten today, Staff Sergeant." "Is that right?" Morrison laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "You think you scare me? Some old woman in a no-name uniform." "I don't think anything about you at all," Callahan replied. "That's precisely the problem." Fletcher zoomed in with his phone, anticipating an explosion. This was going to make excellent entertainment for the platoon. Morrison grabbed her tray and shoved it aside. Food scattered across the table. "You listen to me," he hissed. "I don't know who you think you are, but you're in our house now. You don't talk to a Force Recon Marine like that. You don't disrespect us and walk away. We'll end you, lady. We'll end your career. We'll make sure you never set foot in a training facility again." Callahan didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She simply sat there, her hands resting on the table as still as a stone. "Are you finished?" she asked. "I haven't even started." "Yes," she said quietly. "You have." She rose from her seat, not quickly, not aggressively. She simply stood, and somehow that simple action shifted the entire dynamic. She wasn't tall, perhaps 5'6", but her posture was perfect, a straight line of controlled power. Morrison's team instinctively adjusted their positions, tightening the circle around her. She looked at each of them in turn. Fletcher with his phone, Webb with his bulk, Ortiz with his nervous energy, and finally, Morrison, his face mottled with rage. "You've surrounded a senior officer in a public facility," she said, her voice carrying just far enough to reach nearby tables. "You've made threats against my career. You've recorded this interaction without consent, and you've done all of this in full view of 2 security cameras." She pointed without looking. Cameras SEO-7 and SEO-8 mounted on the far walls, their lenses capturing everything. Morrison's confidence flickered. Just for a moment. "What are you talking about? You're not a senior officer. You don't have any rank on your uniform." "Well, that's correct." Callahan smoothed her utilities. "I don't." She stepped to her left. It was a small movement, a pivot on the ball of her foot, but it brought her shoulder within inches of Webb's chest. He shifted his weight backward, instinctively creating a gap. She flowed through it like water. "Hey." Morrison spun to face her. "We're not done here." She walked to the tray, returned, deposited her scattered utensils, and continued toward the exit. She never looked back. "Yeah, you better run," Morrison shouted. His voice bounced off the walls, drawing attention from every corner of the facility. "Go back to your desk, lady, file your paperwork. Leave the real work to real warriors." Callahan stopped at the door. She turned just slightly so her profile was visible. "My name is Commander Margaret Callahan," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the dining facility like a blade through silk. "Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Advanced Sniper Cadre. I've been training shooters since before you graduated boot camp, Staff Sergeant." She paused, letting the words settle. "And I never miss." Then she was gone. The silence in the immediate aftermath lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Morrison exploded. "Who the hell does she think she is?" He slammed his fist against a table, sending trays rattling. "Some Navy desk jockey talking to me like that in front of my team." Fletcher lowered his phone, suddenly uncertain. "Staff Sergeant, did she say DevGru?" "I don't care what she said." Morrison was pacing now, his boots striking the linoleum with sharp, angry cracks. She disrespected me. She disrespected all of us. That doesn't stand. Webb shifted uncomfortably. If she's really special warfare, she's bluffing. Morrison cut him off. Did you see any SEAL trident on her uniform? Any indication she's anything more than some washed-up Navy paper pusher? She's trying to intimidate us. Ortiz raised his hand tentatively. Staff Sergeant, maybe we should just let this go. She didn't actually. Let it go. Morrison rounded on him. She threatened us. You heard her. I never miss. What the hell is that supposed to mean? That's a threat against a non-commissioned officer. That's a court-martial offense. He was already constructing the narrative in his head. The unstable senior officer, the threatening behavior, the disruption of good order and discipline. I'm filing a complaint, he announced. First thing tomorrow. That woman accosted us in the dining facility. She made hostile statements. She implied violence. He looked at Fletcher. You got all that on video, right? Fletcher nodded slowly. Yeah, but what? I don't know, Staff Sergeant. On the video, it kind of looks like we surrounded her, not the other way around. Morrison snatched the phone from Fletcher's hand and watched the footage. His team crowding her table, his face inches from hers, the scattered food, her quiet, controlled responses. He deleted it. What the hell? Fletcher reached for his phone. Corrupted file, Morrison said, handing it back. These things happen. You'll need to write up a statement instead. All of you will. She approached us aggressively. She made threatening statements. We attempted to defuse the situation peacefully. The team exchanged glances. Staff Sergeant Webb said carefully, there were security cameras, she mentioned them. Security footage can be requested by authorized personnel only, Morrison replied, and by the time anyone thinks to look at it, we'll have our statements on file. 4 witnesses against 1, a Marine Corps staff sergeant with a clean record against some nameless Navy commander nobody's ever heard of. He cracked his knuckles. Trust me, I know how this game is played. By the time I'm done, she'll be lucky to keep her pension. 72 hours earlier, the sun had been setting over the California desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Commander Margaret Callahan stood alone at the 1,000-yard rifle range, her custom M40A6 sniper rifle balanced in her hands. The weapon had been modified to her exact specifications over the course of 20 years. A lighter stock, a heavier barrel, a trigger pull calibrated to 1.8 pounds. The rifle scope was the only piece that wasn't custom. It was old, scratched, and technically obsolete. But it had belonged to her husband, and she would never replace it. She settled into position, her body forming the perfect shooting platform that she had demonstrated 10,000 times for students who were now scattered across the globe, hunting targets in places whose names would never appear in any newspaper. The target was a steel silhouette at 1,000 yards. In the failing light, it was barely visible, a dark shape against a darker landscape. She didn't use the scope. She read the wind by watching the dust devils dance across the desert floor. She calculated the drop by instinct, by the feel of the rifle in her hands, by the temperature of the air against her cheek. She exhaled slowly. For you, Danny, she whispered. She squeezed the trigger. A second later, the distant ping of metal on metal echoed across the range. Dead center. She chambered another round and fired again, and again, and again. 5 shots, 5 hits, a grouping that could be covered by a playing card. Still showing off, I see. The voice came from behind her. Master Gunnery Sergeant William Reeves stepped out of the shadows, his weathered face creased with something between a smile and a grimace. At 64, he was the oldest active-duty Marine in the training command and possibly the most respected. Callahan didn't turn. I'm not showing off. I'm practicing. At 1,000 yards in near darkness without using your scope. That's when the practice matters most. Reeves moved to stand beside her. He looked out at the targets invisible now in the gathering night. Operation Ghost Wind kicks off in 3 days, he said. I know. Pentagon's watching, international observers, 5 countries' special operations teams. This is the biggest joint sniper competition since NATO ran them in the 80s. I know. You'll be running tactical operations for Blue Force. plus evaluating the Marine Scout sniper candidates. I know. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. This came for you today. Classified courier. Eyes only. Callahan finally lowered her rifle. She took the envelope and opened it, sliding out a single photograph and a brief typed letter. The photograph showed a man in desert camouflage kneeling beside a destroyed vehicle. His face was lean and sharp, his eyes intense, his rifle held with the casual familiarity of a man who considered it an extension of his body. Master Chief Daniel Callahan, her husband, dead 13 years. Where did you get this? Personnel archives, Reeves replied. They finally declassified his file. 30-year rule. He paused. I served with him, you know, before you two met. Afghanistan 2003. He was the best shooter I ever saw. I know, Callahan said, her voice suddenly thick. He taught you. Yes. And now you're better than he was. Callahan looked at the photograph. Danny's face frozen in time, forever young while she grew old alone. I don't know about that. I do. Reeves put a hand on her shoulder. He would have wanted you to be here, Maggie, running this operation, training the next generation. Would he? Absolutely. Reeves squeezed once, then released her. He told me the last time I saw him alive. He said you were the best he'd ever trained. Said you had something he didn't have: patience, the ability to wait for the perfect shot when everyone else would have panicked. Callahan slid the photograph back into the envelope. Danny never panicked. No, he didn't, but that's what got him killed. She looked at Reeves sharply. He was aggressive, Reeves continued. Brilliant, but aggressive. Always wanted to be in the fight. Always wanted to take the shot. That day in Afghanistan, he could have waited for extraction. He could have let the target go. But he didn't. He completed the mission. He completed the mission and died doing it. Reeves met her eyes. You're different. You know when to pull the trigger and when to wait. That's why you're still here and he's not. Callahan said nothing. The desert wind whispered across the range, carrying the smell of dust and dried sage. 3 days, Reeves said. Make him proud. Then he walked back toward the main facility, leaving her alone with her rifle and her memories. The next morning, Callahan reported to the Joint Operations Command Center for the pre-exercise briefing. The room was filled with senior officers from 5 nations: American, British, Australian, Canadian, and German. Maps covered every wall. Screens displayed troop positions, communication frequencies, and satellite imagery. At the head of the table sat Colonel Nathan Pierce, commanding officer of the training center. He was a Marine's Marine, ramrod straight, ice blue eyes, a voice that could carry across a parade ground without amplification. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, Operation Ghost Wind is designed to test the absolute limits of our special operations sniper capabilities. Over the next 5 days, Blue Force and Red Force will engage in a series of precision shooting challenges, stalking exercises, and a final 72-hour tactical scenario. He clicked to the next slide. Red Force will be commanded by Sergeant Major Victor Keene, United States Army Special Forces. A murmur rippled through the room. Keene was a legend. 23 years in Green Berets. More confirmed kills than most units combined. The most decorated sniper in modern Special Forces history. Blue Force Tactical Operations will be commanded by Commander Margaret Callahan, Naval Special Warfare. This time the murmur was different, skeptical, questioning. A British SAS captain raised his hand. Excuse me, Colonel. Did you say Commander as in Navy? That's correct. With respect, sir, this is a Marine Corps training facility. Why is a Navy officer commanding Blue Force operations? Pierce smiled thinly. Because Commander Callahan has more experience training special operations snipers than anyone else in this room. She ran the advanced sniper cadre at DevGru for 12 years. She's trained shooters from every branch of service in half the NATO countries. He looked directly at the British captain. Including your regiment, Captain Hayes. The last 3 SAS sniper team leaders all passed through her program. Hayes sat back chastened. Any other questions? Silence. Good. Exercise begins at 0600 Thursday. Dismissed. The officers filed out, talking in low voices. Callahan remained seated, reviewing her notes. She felt someone approach and looked up to find Colonel Pierce standing over her. Commander. A word. Sir. Pierce sat down across from her. His expression was unreadable. I received a complaint this morning, he said, from a Staff Sergeant Morrison, 3rd Force Recon. Callahan's expression didn't change. I'm aware of Staff Sergeant Morrison. He claims you accosted him and his team in the dining facility last night, made threatening statements, implied violence. That's not accurate, sir. I didn't think it was. Pierce leaned back. I've reviewed the security footage. It shows 4 Marines surrounding your table while you ate dinner. It shows Morrison leaning into your face. It shows you remaining calm throughout the encounter, and then leaving peacefully. That's what happened. The footage also shows Morrison grabbing your tray and throwing your food across the table. Callahan shrugged. I wasn't hungry anyway. Pierce studied her for a long moment. Morrison has filed an official complaint. I'm required to investigate. But between you and me, Commander, that man is a disciplinary case waiting to happen. I've had my eye on him for months. With respect, sir, I don't need you to fight my battles. I'm not offering to. Pierce stood. I'm just letting you know that I see what's happening. Morrison is assigned to Blue Force for this exercise. He's one of the sniper candidates you'll be evaluating. Callahan allowed herself a small, cold smile. How unfortunate for him. Keep it professional, Commander. Whatever personal issues exist between you, they stay out of my operation. Understood, sir. I don't have personal issues. Only professional standards. Pierce nodded and walked out. Callahan returned to her notes. In the margin next to the words, Blue Force Sniper Candidates, she had written one name in small, precise letters, Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison. Evaluate thoroughly. That evening at 2200 hours, Callahan walked through the empty corridors of the training facility toward Range 7. Range 7 was the advanced precision course targets from 800 to 2,000 yards, complex wind patterns, elevation changes that required constant adjustment. It was normally reserved for senior instructors and special operations candidates. Tonight it was supposed to be empty. It wasn't. A figure lay in the prone position at the 1,000-yard line, struggling to steady a rifle that seemed too heavy for her frame. She was young, early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and the crossed rifles of a scout sniper candidate on her collar. She fired. The shot went wide, kicking up dust 10 feet from the target. Damn it, she muttered, ejecting the round. Your breathing is wrong, Callahan said. The young Marine spun around, her eyes wide. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was at ease. Callahan walked forward, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. What's your name, Private? Vasquez, ma'am. Private First Class Elena Vasquez. You're one of the sniper candidates. Yes, ma'am. Vasquez looked down. I'm trying to be. I qualified in the preliminaries, but my scores have been dropping. The instructor says if I can't improve by the exercise, I'll be cut from the program. Callahan studied her. Vasquez was small, smaller than Callahan herself, with the compact build of a distance runner. Her hands gripping the rifle were shaking slightly. Show me your shooting position. Vasquez hesitated, then settled back into the prone stance. Callahan walked a slow circle around her, observing. Your breathing is wrong, she repeated. You're trying to hold your breath when you shoot. That creates tension in your shoulders. That's how they taught us in basic. Basic is for infantry. You're training to be a sniper. Different rules. Callahan knelt beside her. Breathe naturally. Don't hold. Fire at the bottom of your exhale when your body is completely relaxed. But I can't keep the sight picture steady if I'm breathing. You're not supposed to keep it steady. You're supposed to predict the movement and fire in the gap. Callahan pointed at the target. Try again. Breathe normally. Feel the rhythm of your body. Fire when it feels right. Vasquez took a breath, then another. She settled into the rhythm, her body slowly relaxing. She fired. The distant ping of metal echoed across the range. "I hit it," Vasquez whispered. "I actually hit it. Again." Another shot. Another hit. Again. 5 shots. 4 hits. The 5th missed by inches. "That's the best grouping I've had in weeks," Vasquez said, her voice trembling with excitement. "How did you know what I was doing wrong?" "Because I've trained 1,000 shooters," Callahan replied. "They all make the same mistakes at first." Vasquez looked at her with new curiosity. "Who are you, ma'am? I haven't seen you in the instructor cadre." "I'm Commander Callahan. I'll be running Blue Force tactical operations for the exercise." "You're the Navy commander." Vasquez's eyes widened. "I heard about you. The Staff Sergeant Morrison, he's been telling everyone you threatened him. Said you're unstable, dangerous." Callahan's expression didn't change. "Do I seem dangerous to you, Private?" Vasquez considered the question carefully. "Yes, ma'am," she said finally. "But not the way Morrison means it." "What way do you mean?" "You seem like someone who knows exactly how dangerous they are, and chooses not to show it unless necessary." Callahan allowed herself a small smile. "Who taught you to shoot, Private Vasquez?" "My grandfather. He was a Marine, Korea and Vietnam." "And who taught him?" "I don't know. He never said." Callahan nodded slowly. "My husband taught me. He was the best. He used to say that shooting isn't about the gun or the target. It's about the space between heartbeats. The moment when everything is perfectly still." "What happened to him?" "He died 13 years ago, Afghanistan." "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Don't be sorry. Be good." Callahan stood and dusted off her knees. "Practice the breathing technique. You have 3 days before the exercise. If you can improve your groupings by 20%, you might just survive the evaluation." She started to walk away. "Ma'am." Callahan stopped. "Thank you," Vasquez said, "for taking the time. Most of the instructors don't bother with candidates like me." "Candidates like what?" "Female, small, easy to dismiss." Callahan turned back. In the dim light of the range, her gray eyes glittered with something cold and hard. "Private Vasquez, in my experience, the most dangerous people in any room are the ones nobody notices, the ones everyone dismisses, the ones who are underestimated." She paused. "Being overlooked is not a weakness. It's a weapon. Learn to use it." Then she walked into the darkness, leaving Vasquez alone with her rifle and a new understanding of what survival really meant. The morning of the exercise, Callahan arrived at the Tactical Operations Center before dawn. The room was a hive of controlled chaos, screens displaying satellite feeds, communications officers monitoring radio traffic operations, specialists tracking the positions of 50 different personnel across 100 square miles of training area. Colonel Pierce stood at the Central Command Station reviewing the final deployment orders. "Commander Callahan," he acknowledged. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Staff Sergeant Morrison has requested a transfer off Blue Force. He claims he can't work effectively under your command due to your hostile behavior toward him." Callahan's expression didn't flicker. "Request denied. That's not your decision to make." "No, sir, but it is yours. And if you transfer Morrison now, you validate every accusation he's made. You also demonstrate that a Marine NCO can escape accountability by filing frivolous complaints." Pierce was quiet for a moment. "Morrison is one of the top reconnaissance Marines in his battalion. Being top in a battalion doesn't make you competent. It makes you better than your immediate peers. There's a difference. You have personal issues with him. I have professional standards. He doesn't meet them. That's not personal." Pierce studied her. "You're asking me to keep a hostile Marine on your team knowing he'll undermine you at every opportunity. I'm asking you to let me do my job. Part of my job is evaluating whether Marines like Morrison belong in special operations. If he can't perform under pressure, I need to know that before he gets someone killed in actual combat. And if he performs well, Callahan's smile was thin and cold, then I'll be the first to congratulate him. Pierce shook his head slowly. Fine, Morrison stays on Blue Force. But if this blows up, Commander, it's on your head. Understood, sir. She turned to the tactical display, already dismissing the conversation from her mind. On the screen, 50 icons represented 50 personnel scattered across the California desert. Blue Force and Red Force. Snipers and spotters. Observers and evaluators. Somewhere out there, Sergeant Major Victor Keene was preparing his Red Force for the first phase of the competition. Keene, who had trained under her at DevGru 15 years ago. Keene, who had learned everything he knew about precision shooting from her patient instruction. Keene, who had no idea that his teacher was about to become his opponent. Callahan pulled up the targeting data and began her analysis. The exercise had begun, and she had a point to prove. The first shots of Operation Ghost Wind echoed across the desert at exactly 0600 hours. Callahan stood at the observation platform, binoculars pressed to her eyes, watching the precision shooting competition unfold on Range Alpha. 12 sniper teams from 5 nations lay in the prone position, their rifles pointed at targets ranging from 500 to 200 yards. The British SAS team fired first. 3 shots, 3 hits, all center mass. The Australian SASR followed with equally impressive results. The Canadian JTF-2 team missed 1 shot at the extreme range but recovered quickly. Then it was Morrison's turn. He settled into position with the exaggerated confidence of a man who had never been truly tested. His spotter, Corporal Webb, called the wind. Morrison adjusted, breathed, and fired. The first shot hit. Barely. Edge of the target, almost a miss. Wind shifted, Webb muttered. Adjust 2 clicks right. Morrison made the adjustment and fired again. This time the shot went wide entirely. Damn it! He slammed his fist against the ground. Steady, Webb warned. You've got 3 more shots. Morrison's 3rd shot hit center. His 4th hit edge. His 5th missed completely. Final score, 60 out of 100. The lowest of any Blue Force team. From her position on the observation platform, Callahan made a note in her evaluation book. She wrote nothing about the score itself. Instead, she wrote, loses composure under pressure, blames external factors, does not adapt. Colonel Pierce approached her. What do you think? I think Staff Sergeant Morrison has been coasting on natural talent and aggression his entire career, Callahan replied without lowering her binoculars. He's never had to work for anything, never had to adapt when things went wrong. That's a harsh assessment. It's an accurate one. Pierce watched Morrison storm away from the firing line, his team trailing behind him like apologetic shadows. The British are in the lead, Pierce observed. Captain Hayes and his team, they're good. They're very good, Callahan agreed. I trained Hayes myself 6 years ago. He was a lieutenant then, arrogant but talented. And now he's still arrogant. But he's learned to channel it. Pierce glanced at her. Is that what you do? Channel your arrogance? Callahan lowered her binoculars and looked at him directly. I'm not arrogant, Colonel. I'm accurate. There's a difference. She walked away before he could respond. The stalking exercise began at 1400 hours. Each team had to approach within 200 meters of an observer position without being detected. Points were awarded for proximity achieved and deducted for each time the team was spotted. The British team went first, moving through the rocky terrain with practiced efficiency. They reached 180 meters before a slight movement gave away their position. Still an excellent score. The Australian team managed 175 meters. The Canadians hit 190, the closest approach of the day. Then Morrison's team took the field. Callahan watched through the observation scope as they began their approach. For the first 100 meters, they moved well. Morrison was in the lead, his team spread out behind him in a proper tactical formation. Then he made his first mistake. Instead of taking the longer, safer route around a ridge, Morrison cut directly across open ground. He was impatient, eager to prove himself after his poor shooting performance. What is he doing? Pierce muttered. Exactly what I expected, Callahan replied. The observer spotted Morrison at 340 meters. A flag went up. First detection. Morrison froze, then continued more carefully now. But the damage was done. His team's confidence was shaken. At 280 meters, Webb shifted his weight at the wrong moment. Second detection. At 240 meters, Ortiz sneezed. Third detection. By the time they reached 200 meters, Morrison's team had been spotted 5 times, the worst performance of any team in the competition. Morrison's face was crimson as he walked off the course. He passed within 10 feet of Callahan, close enough for her to hear him mutter, "This is rigged." "That old woman set us up to fail." Callahan said nothing. She simply made another note in her evaluation book, "Paranoid. Externalizes failure. Leadership liability." That night at 2100 hours, Callahan returned to Range 7. She wasn't surprised to find Vasquez there practicing in the darkness. "Your groupings have improved," Callahan observed, studying the target through her binoculars. Vasquez jumped slightly, then relaxed. "Ma'am, I didn't hear you approach." "That's the point." Callahan walked to stand beside her. "You've been practicing the breathing technique." "Yes, ma'am. It's helping." Vasquez hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Staff Sergeant Morrison has been talking about you, to everyone who will listen. He says you're trying to sabotage Blue Force. He says you have a personal vendetta against Marines." Callahan's expression didn't change. "And what do you think?" "I think he's scared of you." "Why would he be scared of me?" "Because you see him." Vasquez met her eyes. "You see what he really is, and that terrifies him more than any enemy." Callahan was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and adjusted Vasquez's grip on her rifle. "Your support hand is too far forward. Move it back 2 inches. Vasquez made the adjustment. "Now fire." The shot rang out. The target pinged. "Better," Callahan said. "Tomorrow is the final phase, the 72-hour tactical scenario. Do you know what that means? Live simulation, Blue Force versus Red Force, sniper operations in contested terrain. Do you know who's commanding Red Force?" "Sergeant Major Keene, the Green Beret legend." Callahan nodded slowly. "I trained Victor Keene 15 years ago. He was the most talented natural shooter I'd ever seen. Fast, aggressive, instinctive. Sounds like Morrison. Similar raw abilities, different character." Callahan paused. Keene listened. Keene learned. Keene understood that talent without discipline is worthless. "Did he ever beat you?" "In what?" "Shooting. Did he ever outshoot you?" Callahan's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Once, at the end of his training, I let him win." "Why?" "Because he needed to believe he could. Because that confidence would keep him alive in combat." She looked at Vasquez. "But he never beat me when it mattered. No one has." Vasquez absorbed this information. "What happened between you and Morrison in the dining facility?" "He made a mistake," Callahan said simply. "He looked at me and saw an easy target. A small woman, an old woman, someone he could intimidate to feel powerful. And now he's trying to destroy you before you destroy him. He can't destroy me. He can only destroy himself." Callahan stepped back from the firing line. "Get some sleep, Private. Tomorrow we find out who's really capable of surviving under pressure." She walked away into the darkness. Behind her, Vasquez chambered another round and continued practicing. The 72-hour tactical scenario began at 0500 hours on a Thursday morning. Callahan stood in the Blue Force Command Center surrounded by screens and communications equipment. Colonel Pierce had given her full tactical authority. Every sniper team, every reconnaissance element, every observer, they all reported to her, including Morrison. "All Blue Force elements, this is Phoenix," Callahan said into her radio. "Exercise is now active. Move to your designated positions and await further instructions." Across the desert, 12 Blue Force teams began their deployment. Each carried GPS trackers, encrypted radios, and blank ammunition that would register kills on the exercise computer system. Red Force, commanded by Keene, was doing the same. For the first 6 hours, everything proceeded according to plan. Blue Force teams established observation posts. Communications remained clear. GPS showed all units in their designated positions. Callahan monitored the feeds, analyzing patterns, predicting Keen's moves. She knew how he thought. She had trained him to think that way. Red Force is being cautious, she said to Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves, who stood beside her. Keen's not making any aggressive moves. That's not like him, Reeves observed. No, it's not. Callahan frowned at the screen. He's waiting for something. Waiting for what? Before Callahan could answer, the first alarm sounded. GPS anomaly, a technician called out. We're getting drift on multiple satellites. Callahan spun to face the main display. The blue icons representing her teams began to shift, moving to positions that made no tactical sense. That's not drift, she said. That's spoofing. Someone is feeding false data to our GPS receivers. Another alarm, then another. Encrypted comms are degrading, a communications officer reported. I'm getting static on all primary channels. Switch to backup frequencies. Backup frequencies are jammed. The screens began to flicker. The carefully orchestrated network of Blue Force communications was collapsing in real time. Callahan's mind raced through the possibilities. This wasn't a simple electronic attack. This was sophisticated, layered, designed to systematically dismantle every system Blue Force depended on. Keen, she breathed. What? Reeves leaned closer. He's not attacking our teams. He's attacking our infrastructure. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to isolate the interference patterns. He learned this from me. Turn the enemy's technology against them. Blind them before you strike. Can you stop it? Not from here. Callahan pulled up the tactical display. I need to get into the field. Find the source of the interference and neutralize it. That's not your job. You're supposed to command from here. I can't command anything if I can't see or communicate. She grabbed her rifle kit from the corner of the room. Tell Pierce I'm going dark. Radio silence until I re-establish contact. Maggie. But she was already gone. 20 miles away, Staff Sergeant Morrison lay in a rocky canyon with his team, watching his world fall apart. His GPS showed him 3 miles from his actual position. His radio produced nothing but static. His satellite uplink was dead. What the hell is happening? Webb demanded. I don't know. Morrison's voice cracked with frustration. Equipment malfunction has to be. All our equipment. At the same time, Fletcher checked his phone. No signal. Not even the emergency beacon was working. We're blind, Ortiz said, his voice trembling. Staff Sergeant, we're completely blind. Morrison's training told him to stay calm, to assess the situation, to develop a plan. But his training had never prepared him for this. He had always relied on technology. GPS to know where he was. Radio to call for support. Satellite imagery to see what was coming. Now he had nothing. We hold position, he said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Wait for comms to come back online. And if they don't, they will. This is just a glitch. But even as he said it, Morrison knew he was lying. This wasn't a glitch. This was an attack. And he had no idea how to respond. He thought suddenly and unwillingly of the woman in the dining facility. The one he had threatened. The one who had looked at him with those empty gray eyes and said, I never miss. What had she meant by that? What did she know that he didn't? The question haunted him as the desert sun rose higher and his situation grew more desperate. Callahan moved through the terrain like a ghost. At 54, her body wasn't what it had been at 30. Her knees ached. Her lower back protested every uneven step. But her mind was sharper than ever, and her instincts were honed by decades of experience. She read the land the way most people read books. Every ridge, every depression, every cluster of rocks told a story. Where an enemy might hide, where a shot could be taken, where the wind would shift and alter a bullet's path. The interference had a source. Electronic warfare equipment left signatures, power consumption, heat generation, electromagnetic radiation. Find the source, neutralize it, restore communications. Simple in concept, nightmarish in execution. She moved for 2 hours, covering 8 miles of rough terrain. Her rifle was slung across her back. Her sidearm was holstered at her hip. She carried no GPS, no radio, no technological aids of any kind. She didn't need them. At 1100 hours, she found the first emitter. It was hidden in a rocky outcropping, a sophisticated electronic warfare system mounted on a vehicle that had been camouflaged to blend with the surrounding terrain. 2 Red Force operators guarded it, their attention focused outward, watching for approaching Blue Force teams. They weren't watching for a lone 54-year-old woman approaching from an impossible angle. Callahan studied them through her rifle scope. In a real combat situation, she would take the shot. 2 rounds, 2 kills, problem solved. But this was an exercise. Different rules. She circled to a position above and behind the emitter. The operators never saw her. They never heard her. She took careful aim at the emitter's antenna array and fired. The blank round triggered a sensor on the equipment. A red light began flashing, the exercise equivalent of destroyed. "What the hell?" one of the operators shouted. Callahan fired twice more. Both operators' vests registered kills. "I'm hit," the first operator said, looking around wildly. "Where did that come from?" But Callahan was already moving, disappearing into the terrain before they could identify her position. 1 emitter down. 3 to go. Back at Blue Force Command, chaos reigned. Colonel Pierce had taken over operations, but he was fighting a losing battle. Without GPS, he couldn't track his teams. Without communications, he couldn't give orders. The entire exercise was spiraling toward disaster. "Sir," a technician called out. "I'm getting a partial signal back. Source unknown, but one of the interference sources just went offline." Pierce stared at the screen. A small section of the tactical display had cleared, showing actual positions instead of spoofed data. "How?" he demanded. Reeves, standing in the corner, allowed himself a small smile. "Phoenix," he said quietly. "She's hunting them." Pierce turned to him. "Callahan. She's supposed to be commanding from here. She's doing what she does best, adapting, improvising, eliminating threats. She's a commander, not a field operator." "Sir, with respect." Reeves met his eyes. "She's both. She's always been both." On the tactical display, another section cleared. A second emitter had been destroyed. Pierce watched in silence as the woman he had almost dismissed began to single-handedly salvage his exercise. Morrison's situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. Red Force had found his position. 3 sniper teams were closing in from different directions. His GPS was still useless. His radio still produced nothing but static, and he was out of ideas. "We have to move," Webb said urgently. "They'll be on us in 10 minutes. "Move where?" Morrison demanded. "We can't navigate without GPS. We don't know where friendly forces are. We could walk right into an ambush. We'll definitely die if we stay here." Morrison's hands were shaking. He could feel his team looking at him, waiting for orders, waiting for leadership. He had none to give. "Staff Sergeant." Ortiz's voice was barely a whisper. "I think someone's out there." Morrison followed his gaze to a ridge 300 meters away. Nothing moved. Nothing was visible. But Ortiz was right. Something was out there. Morrison could feel it, a presence, a threat, invisible but undeniable. "Everyone down," he ordered. "Minimum movement, minimum noise." They pressed themselves against the rocks, weapons ready, waiting for an attack that could come from any direction. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then impossibly, Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Recon 3. This is Phoenix. Do you copy?" Morrison fumbled for his radio. "Phoenix. Who is this? How are you broadcasting?" "Listen carefully. Staff Sergeant, I don't have time to explain. You have 3 Red Force teams converging on your position. They'll reach you in approximately 7 minutes. I know that. What am I supposed to do about it?" "You're going to move. North-northeast bearing 025. There's a draw about 400 meters from your current position. It will provide cover for extraction. I can't navigate without GPS. Then use your eyes. Look for the rock formation that looks like a clenched fist. Move toward it. I'll provide overwatch." Overwatch from where? That's not your concern. Move now, Staff Sergeant. You have 6 minutes. The line went dead. Morrison stared at his radio. The woman's voice echoed in his head, calm, controlled, completely devoid of the panic he felt. She was out there somewhere, watching, waiting. What do we do? Webb asked. Morrison looked at his team, at the fear in their eyes, at the expectation that he would make the right call. For once in his life, he had no idea what the right call was, but he knew that staying here meant failure, meant death, meant the end of everything he had worked for. We move, he said. North-northeast. Look for a rock formation shaped like a fist. You're trusting her? Fletcher's voice was incredulous. The woman who threatened us. She didn't threaten us, Morrison said quietly. We threatened her, and right now she's the only reason we're still in this exercise. He began moving his team, falling in behind him. Somewhere on a ridge he couldn't see, Commander Margaret Callahan watched through her scope, her finger resting lightly on the trigger, ready to do what she did best. The Red Force teams never knew what hit them. The first sniper team crested a ridge, moving to cut off Morrison's escape route. Callahan's shot caught the lead operator in the center of his chest. His vest registered the kill. He dropped. His partner spun, searching for the source of the shot. He never found it. Callahan's second round took him before he could even raise his weapon. The second team heard the shots and went to ground, scanning the horizon with their optics. They were good, well-trained, experienced, but they were looking in the wrong direction. Callahan had moved the moment she fired her first shots, displacing to a new position 500 meters away. When the second team finally located her original position, she was already behind them. 2 more shots, 2 more kills. The third team tried to run. They broke cover and sprinted for a rocky outcropping that would provide protection from sniper fire. They didn't make it. Callahan's shots were impossibly accurate, on 200 meters crosswind moving targets. She led each runner by exactly the right amount, adjusting for wind and movement, with the instinctive precision of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. 3 shots, 3 kills. In less than 4 minutes, she had eliminated an entire Red Force element. 6 operators, all dead, none of whom had ever seen her face. Morrison reached the extraction point to find the terrain littered with Red Force casualties. He stared at the bodies operators lying motionless where they had been shot, their vests flashing red to indicate kills. What happened here? Webb breathed. She happened, Morrison said quietly. He looked up at the ridges surrounding the draw, searching for any sign of the woman who had just saved his team. He saw nothing. The desert was empty, silent, as if the violence of the last few minutes had never occurred. But she was out there, watching. He could feel her eyes on him, that pale gray gaze that seemed to see straight through every pretense, every lie, every wall he had built around his inadequacy. For the first time in his life, Derek Morrison understood what it felt like to be completely outclassed. And it terrified him more than any enemy ever had. At Blue Force Command, the tactical displays were coming back online one by one. A third emitter had been destroyed, then a fourth. The GPS spoofing stopped. Communications cleared. The fog of electronic warfare lifted, revealing a battlefield that had been transformed. "Sir," a technician said, his voice filled with disbelief, "you need to see this." Pierce stepped forward to look at the screen. It showed a kill log every Red Force operator eliminated since the interference began. 23 kills, all attributed to a single call sign, Phoenix. "That's impossible," Pierce said. "One operator can't have eliminated 23 targets in," he checked the timestamp, 2 hours. Reeves shook his head. "Not one operator, one sniper. There's a difference. She's not even supposed to be in the field. With respect, Colonel, she's exactly where she needs to be." Reeves pointed at the display. "Look at the pattern. She's not just eliminating targets. She's systematically dismantling Red Force's entire electronic warfare capability. Every emitter, every communications node, every command position. She's fighting a one-woman war, and she's winning." Pierce stared at the screen for a long moment. "Get me a link to her," he said finally. "I want to know what the hell she's planning." She's on radio silence, sir. No way to reach her. Then we wait. And we watch. Pierce looked at Reeves. Is she really that good? Sir. Reeves said quietly, she's better than you can imagine. Callahan found Keen's command position at 1400 hours. It was hidden in a narrow canyon protected by rocky walls on 3 sides. A modified tactical operations center bristling with antennas and electronics. The brain of Red Force's operation. 2 guards patrolled the entrance. Another 4 operators worked inside. And at the center of it all, directing his forces with the precision of a master chess player, was Sergeant Major Victor Keene. Callahan studied him through her scope. He had aged since she'd seen him last, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. But his posture was the same. His focus was the same. She had trained that focus, honed that precision, turned a talented but undisciplined young soldier into the legend he had become. And now she was going to destroy him. She keyed her radio broadcasting on an emergency frequency she knew Keene would be monitoring. Victor, the voice crackled through the command center. Keene's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the ridges above. Hello, Maggie, he said into his own radio. I wondered when you'd find me. You've been running an impressive operation, sophisticated electronic warfare, coordinated targeting, very professional. I learned from the best. You learned most of what I taught you, not everything. Keene smiled grimly. Is that supposed to intimidate me? It's supposed to be honest. You're good, Victor. Maybe the best active sniper in special operations. But you made a mistake. What mistake? Callahan let the silence stretch for a moment. You forgot that I'm better. She fired. The shot covered 400 meters in less than 2 seconds. It struck the main antenna array of Keene's command center, triggering the exercise sensors. Alarms screamed. Operators dove for cover. The command center's displays flickered and died. Keene stood motionless, staring at the destroyed antenna. He knew what that shot meant. 400 meters, complex wind, downhill angle, a shot that maybe 3 people in the world could have made, and one of them had just made it against him. That was impressive, he said into his radio. That was a warning, Callahan replied. Surrender your position, and I'll let your team walk out alive. Make me come down there and I'll eliminate every one of you. Keene looked at his operators. They were good men, well-trained, capable. But they were outmatched, and they knew it. You can't take all of us, he said. Not alone. I've already taken 23 of your people in 2 hours without being seen. Callahan's voice was as cold as Arctic ice. Do you really want to test me, Victor? Keene was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he raised his hands. All Red Force elements, this is Sierra. Stand down. I repeat, stand down. He looked up at the ridge where he knew she was watching. You win, Maggie. This time. Callahan watched through her scope as Red Force operators emerged from cover, their hands raised in surrender. Victory. But she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired, old. Like a machine that had been running too long at too high a speed. She lowered her rifle and began the long walk back to Blue Force Command. The exercise was over, but her real battle with Morrison, with the institution, with everyone who had underestimated her, was just beginning. The walk back to Blue Force Command took Callahan 3 hours. Her knees screamed with every step. Her lower back had seized up somewhere around mile 4. The rifle across her shoulders felt like it weighed 100 pounds instead of 12. But she kept moving, 1 foot in front of the other, the same way she had moved through every difficult moment of the last 30 years. When she finally reached the command center, she found a crowd waiting for her. Colonel Pierce stood at the entrance, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a cluster of officers and senior NCOs watched with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been respect. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves pushed through the crowd and reached her first. You look like hell, he said quietly. Feel like it too. Callahan unslung her rifle and handed it to him. How bad is the damage? To Red Force, catastrophic. You eliminated their entire electronic warfare capability and forced Keene to surrender. Reeves paused. To you, That depends on how the colonel decides to interpret your actions. Callahan looked past him to Pierce, who was now walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. Commander Callahan, Pierce said, his voice pitched to Carrie. You abandoned your command post. You went dark on communications. You operated without authorization in a combat zone. Yes, sir. You also single-handedly destroyed 4 enemy emitters, eliminated 27 Red Force operators, and forced the surrender of the opposing commander. Pierce stopped directly in front of her. Would you like to explain yourself? Callahan met his eyes without flinching. My command post was useless, sir. Our communications were compromised, our GPS was spoofed, and our tactical picture was completely corrupted. I couldn't command anything from a bunker full of dead screens. So you decided to go hunting instead. I decided to eliminate the threat. That's what I'm trained to do. Pierce stared at her for a long moment. The crowd held its collective breath. Then unexpectedly, his lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. General Bradford is on his way from Washington, he said. He wants to meet the officer who just redefined the doctrine for electronic warfare response. I didn't redefine anything, sir. I just did what was necessary. Commander, you took out an entire enemy network by yourself, in 2 hours, without any technological support. Pierce shook his head slowly. That's not what was necessary. That's what was impossible, until you did it. He turned to address the crowd. Exercise Ghost Wind is concluded. Blue Force victory. All personnel will report to the main assembly area at 0800 tomorrow for the after-action review. The crowd began to disperse, but Pierce turned back to Callahan. Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Sir Callahan said, What about Staff Sergeant Morrison? Pierce's expression hardened. What about him? He and his team were in serious trouble out there. If I hadn't intervened, they would have been eliminated. I'm aware. Are you also aware that he's been spreading rumors about me, that he's been telling everyone I'm sabotaging Blue Force, that I'm mentally unstable? Pierce nodded slowly. I'm aware of that too, and I promise you, Commander, it will be addressed. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. He walked away before she could argue. Callahan stood alone in the fading light, her body aching, her mind still racing with the events of the day. She had won the battle. But the war, the real war, the one against the prejudice and contempt that men like Morrison represented, that war was far from over. Reeves appeared at her shoulder. Come on, he said gently. I'll walk you to your quarters. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're 54 years old and you just covered 15 miles of rough terrain while eliminating half an enemy force. He took her arm. Let someone help you for once in your stubborn life. Callahan wanted to argue, but the truth was, she was exhausted. More exhausted than she had been in years. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. They walked in silence through the darkening facility. 2 old warriors carrying the weight of decades of service. Morrison couldn't sleep. He lay on his cot in the Blue Force barracks, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day in his mind. She had saved him. The woman he had threatened. The woman he had tried to destroy, she had saved his life. Not his actual life, of course. This was an exercise. But in real combat with real bullets, he would be dead right now. His whole team would be dead. And she would have been the only thing standing between them and annihilation. The thought made his stomach churn. Staff Sergeant Webb's voice came from the neighboring cot. You awake? Yeah. I've been thinking about today. What about it? Webb was quiet for a moment. She could have let us die. In the exercise, I mean. She could have just let Red Force take us out. After what we did to her in the dining facility, nobody would have blamed her. But she didn't. No, she didn't. Webb paused. Why do you think she saved us? Morrison didn't answer immediately. The question had been haunting him for hours. I don't know, he finally admitted. I really don't know. Staff Sergeant, I think we made a mistake. That night in the mess hall. I know what we did. Morrison's voice was harsh, defensive. I was there. Then maybe we should apologize, before this gets any worse. Apologize. Morrison sat up, his face flushed with anger. To her, After she humiliated us in front of everyone. She didn't humiliate us. We humiliated ourselves. Webb met his eyes in the darkness. Staff Sergeant, she's a DevGru commander. She's trained SEAL snipers for 20 years. She's got more kills than our whole platoon combined, and we treated her like she was nothing. She looked like nothing. She looked like a middle-aged woman eating dinner alone. That's all she looked like. Webb shook his head. But that's the point, isn't it? We saw what we wanted to see. We didn't bother to look deeper. Morrison lay back down, his jaw tight. Webb was right. He knew Webb was right. But admitting it meant admitting that everything he believed about himself, his strength, his superiority, his right to dominate, was built on a foundation of arrogance and insecurity. And he wasn't ready to face that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Callahan was awake before sunrise, as she always was. She stood at the window of her quarters, watching the sky lighten, thinking about what the day would bring. General Bradford was coming from Washington. That meant this was bigger than a training exercise now. The Pentagon was interested. The brass was watching. And Morrison's complaint was still hanging over her head like a sword. She dressed in her service uniform, the one with her ribbons and her rank insignia clearly displayed. Today, there would be no ambiguity about who she was. At 07:30, a knock sounded on her door. She opened it to find Private First Class Vasquez standing at attention. "Ma'am," Vasquez said, "Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves sent me to escort you to the assembly area." "Escort me?" "Yes, ma'am." Vasquez's eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. "He said you'd probably try to skip breakfast and go straight to work. He wanted to make sure that didn't happen." Despite herself, Callahan smiled. "Did he now?" "Yes, ma'am. He said to tell you that even legends need to eat." Callahan shook her head and stepped out of her quarters. "Lead the way, Private." They walked in silence for a few moments before Vasquez spoke again. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Yesterday during the exercise, the shots you made, everyone's talking about them. They're saying some of them were impossible. Over 1,000 meters moving targets, crosswind conditions." "What's your question?" Vasquez hesitated. "How did you do it?" Callahan considered the question as they walked. "When I was learning to shoot," she said finally, "my husband used to tell me that every shot has a moment, a single instant when everything is perfectly aligned. The wind, the target, your breath, your heartbeat. If you can find that moment and act in it, you never miss. But how do you find it? Practice. Thousands and thousands of hours of practice, until it becomes instinct, until you don't have to think about it anymore." Callahan glanced at her. "You have that potential, Private. I saw it that night on the range. The way you adjusted after I corrected your breathing, the way you stopped fighting the rifle and started flowing with it. I'm not in your league, ma'am, not even close. Not yet, but you could be, someday." Vasquez was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "Ma'am, there's something else, something I think you should know." "What is it?" "Staff Sergeant Morrison has been talking to some of the other candidates. He's trying to get them to support his complaint against you. He's saying that you endangered his team by going dark on communications, that you used the exercise as cover to pursue a personal vendetta." Callahan's expression didn't change. "Is anyone believing him?" "Some. The ones who don't know what really happened." Vasquez paused. "But most of the people who were in the command center saw the truth. They saw how you saved his team. They saw the kill log. 27 eliminations in 2 hours. 28, Callahan corrected. I got one more on the way back. Red Force straggler who thought he could ambush me." Vasquez stared at her. "You eliminated someone while walking back to base." "He made noise. I heard him coming." Callahan shrugged. "Like I said, practice." The assembly area was already filling with personnel when they arrived. 500 service members from 5 nations were gathered in the vast space arranged by unit and country. The British SAS contingent stood at rigid attention. The Australians were relaxed but alert. The Canadians chatted quietly among themselves. And at the front of the room on a raised platform stood Colonel Pierce General Bradford, and a cluster of senior officers whose ribbons and stars marked them as some of the most powerful men in the military. Reeves intercepted Callahan as she entered. "You ready for this?" he asked. "Does it matter?" "It always matters." He handed her a folder. "General Bradford asked for your complete service record. I took the liberty of adding some supplementary materials." "What kind of materials?" "The kind that tell the whole story, not just the parts that fit Morrison's narrative." Callahan opened the folder and scanned its contents. Her eyes widened slightly. "You got the security footage? I'm a master gunnery sergeant with 40 years of service. I know people." Reeves met her eyes. "Whatever happens today, Maggie, the truth is going to come out. All of it." Before she could respond, Pierce's voice boomed across the assembly area. "All personnel, attention to orders." The crowd snapped to attention as one. Pierce stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Operation Ghost Wind is concluded. Before we proceed with the after-action review, I want to recognize the outstanding performance of one individual whose actions yesterday demonstrated the absolute highest standards of tactical excellence." He paused, and Callahan felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Commander Margaret Callahan, front and center. Callahan walked forward, her back straight, her stride measured. 500 pairs of eyes followed her progress. She stopped at the base of the platform and saluted. General Bradford stepped forward. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen more than his share of combat. "Commander Callahan," he said, his voice carrying easily without amplification. "Yesterday you single-handedly eliminated 4 enemy electronic warfare emitters, neutralized 28 Red Force operators, and forced the surrender of the opposing commander. You did this without GPS, without reliable communications, and without any technological support." He paused. "In my 35 years of military service, I have never seen anything like it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Your actions didn't just win this exercise," Bradford continued. "They demonstrated a new paradigm for electronic warfare response. When our technology fails, and in modern warfare it will fail, we need operators who can function without it, who can adapt, improvise, and overcome through pure skill and determination." He reached into his pocket and withdrew something that glittered in the fluorescent light. "It is my privilege to present you with the Joint Service Commendation Medal in recognition of your exceptional performance during Operation Ghost Wind." The crowd broke into applause. Callahan accepted the medal with steady hands, but inside she felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. Recognition was not something she sought. Recognition was dangerous. It drew attention, created expectations, invited scrutiny. But she couldn't deny that this moment felt good. After decades of working in the shadows, of being overlooked and underestimated, someone was finally acknowledging what she was capable of. Bradford shook her hand. "I understand there's been some controversy regarding your conduct during this exercise," he said quietly, too low for the microphone to pick up. "Yes, sir. We'll address that next. Stay where you are." He turned back to the crowd, his expression hardening. "There is, however, another matter that must be addressed. A matter of conduct unbecoming military personnel." The murmur that had followed the medal presentation died instantly. The silence that replaced it was absolute. Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison front and center. From somewhere in the back of the assembly area, Morrison emerged. His face was pale, his movements stiff. He walked forward like a man approaching his own execution. He stopped beside Callahan and saluted. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," Bradford said, his voice now cold. "You filed an official complaint against Commander Callahan, alleging that she threatened you and your team, that she displayed hostile behavior, and that she created a dangerous environment that endangered personnel." "Yes, sir. Colonel Pierce investigated your complaint. Would you like to know what he found?" Morrison's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." Bradford gestured, and a large screen behind the platform flickered to life. Security footage. The dining facility. Timestamp 3 days ago. The crowd watched in silence as 4 Marines surrounded a lone woman eating at a corner table. They watched Morrison lean into her face, his body language aggressive, dominating. They watched him grab her tray and scatter her food. They watched him threaten her while his team laughed, and they watched her rise calm and controlled and walk away without ever raising her voice. The footage ended. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," Bradford said, his voice now edged with barely controlled fury. "What you just watched is the truth, not the story you told, not the narrative you constructed, the truth." Morrison said nothing. His face had gone from pale to gray. "You saw a woman eating alone," Bradford continued. "A small woman, a quiet woman, a woman who didn't fit your image of what a warrior should look like, and you decided she was an easy target." He stepped closer to Morrison. "You surrounded her. You invaded her space. You threatened her career. You told her, and I quote, 'We'll end you, lady.' And when she reported your conduct through proper channels, you conspired with your team to manufacture evidence against her." "Sir, I'm not finished." Bradford's voice cracked like a whip. "The woman you threatened is Commander Margaret Callahan. She has been training special operations snipers since before you graduated high school. She has more confirmed kills than your entire battalion combined. She is by every objective measure one of the finest military operators of her generation." Bradford paused, letting the words sink in. "And yesterday, when your team was trapped and about to be eliminated, she saved you. Not because you deserved it, not because you had earned her protection, but because that's who she is. A warrior who protects other warriors, even the ones who don't deserve her protection." Morrison's hands were shaking now. His eyes were fixed on the ground. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Staff Sergeant?" For a long moment, Morrison didn't respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I was wrong." "What was that?" "I was wrong, sir." Morrison looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. "I saw what I wanted to see. I didn't bother to look at who she really was. I just saw someone I could push around, someone who would make me feel powerful." He turned to face Callahan. "Commander, I apologize. I apologize for my words, my actions, and my complete failure to treat you with the respect you've earned. There's no excuse for what I did. I was arrogant. I was ignorant. I was everything a Marine should never be." His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." The assembly area was utterly silent. 500 people watched as a Force Recon staff sergeant, a man who had built his entire identity on strength and aggression, crumbled before their eyes. Callahan studied him, his shaking hands, his tear-streaked face, the complete collapse of everything he had pretended to be. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," she said quietly. He looked at her, bracing for condemnation. "Your apology is accepted." Morrison's eyes widened. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't this. "But understand something," Callahan continued. "I don't forgive you for my sake. I forgive you because carrying anger is exhausting and I have better things to do with my energy. What happens to your career, your reputation, your future, that's not up to me, that's up to you." She paused. "You have talent, raw, undisciplined talent. You could be an excellent operator if you learn to control the ego that's been driving you your entire life. Whether you make that choice is something only you can decide." She turned back to General Bradford. "Sir, I have nothing more to add." Bradford nodded slowly. There was something new in his eyes, a respect that went beyond her tactical performance. "Colonel Pierce," he said, "execute the personnel actions as discussed." Pierce stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison, you are hereby reduced in rank to sergeant. You are removed from Force Reconnaissance and will be reassigned to a regular infantry unit pending completion of a remedial leadership course." He turned to the 3 corporals standing at attention nearby. "Corporal Ryan Fletcher, Corporal Marcus Webb, Lance Corporal Tommy Ortiz. You are each reduced 1 grade and will share the same reassignment and training requirements." He faced the full assembly. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Excellence takes many forms. It doesn't always look like what you expect. And the moment you assume someone is beneath you based on their age, their gender, or their appearance, that's the moment you've already lost." He stepped back. General Bradford took the microphone one final time. "Commander Callahan, I'm recommending you for promotion to full captain and assignment as commanding officer of a new Joint Services sniper training program. The Pentagon believes your approach, combining traditional skills with modern technology, represents the future of special operations warfare. Callahan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her gray eyes. Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for a command position. Why not? I've spent my entire career in the shadows, working alone, avoiding attention. Command means visibility, politics, compromise. Bradford smiled slightly. Commander, you just demonstrated that you can lead by example in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. You adapted to a crisis. You made impossible decisions under impossible pressure. And when a man who had threatened you needed help, you helped him anyway. He shook his head. That's not just competence, that's character. And it's exactly what we need in a commanding officer. The crowd began to applaud. It started slowly, just a few hands clapping, but it built and built until the sound filled the assembly area like thunder. Callahan stood at attention, her face impassive, accepting the recognition she had never sought. But somewhere behind the mask, in a place she rarely allowed herself to visit, something warm was spreading through her chest. It felt, she realized, like vindication. It felt like justice. It felt like everything Danny had told her she deserved all those years ago was finally coming true. 2 hours later, Callahan stood alone at the 1,000-yard range. The ceremony was over. The crowds had dispersed. The politicians and generals had returned to their offices and their endless meetings. And she was exactly where she needed to be. She raised her rifle, settled into position, and began to shoot. One shot. One hit. Another shot. Another hit. The rhythm was meditation. The precision was prayer. Each trigger pull was a conversation with Danny, with her past, with everything she had lost and everything she had become. You were right, she whispered between shots. You were always right. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. She already knew who it was. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves stopped beside her and watched the distant targets. Bradford meant what he said. He offered. The new program. They want you to lead it. I know. It's a big responsibility. Training the next generation. I know. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Danny would be proud. Callahan lowered her rifle. For the first time all day, her composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to let the grief show through. Would he? Absolutely. Reeves put a hand on her shoulder. Not because of the medals or the promotions. Because you stayed true to who you are. Because when you had every reason to let Morrison fail, you saved him instead. Because you showed everyone what real strength looks like. He squeezed once, then released. That's what he always saw in you. The thing that made you different from everyone else he ever trained. You're not just good at this. You're good, period. A good person. A good warrior. The whole package. Callahan blinked rapidly, fighting back the moisture in her eyes. I miss him, she said quietly. Every day. Every shot. I miss him. I know. Reeves stepped back. But he's still with you. In every technique you teach, every student you train, every impossible shot you make, he lives on in your work, in your legacy. He began to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. Private Vasquez passed her evaluation. Top scores in the stalking exercise. She wants you to know it was because of what you taught her that night on the range. Despite everything, Callahan smiled. She's got potential. She's got a mentor now. That's even better. Reeves tipped his hat. See you tomorrow, Commander. We've got a program to build. He walked away into the gathering darkness. Callahan watched him go, then turned back to the range. One more shot. One more hit. For Danny. For herself. For everyone who had ever been underestimated. The exercise was over. But her mission, her real mission, was just beginning. 3 weeks after Operation Ghost Wind. Callahan stood in an empty hangar at Camp Pendleton, watching construction crews install the first equipment for the Joint Special Operations Sniper Academy. The facility would be state-of-the-art when completed. Indoor ranges with variable lighting and weather simulation. Virtual reality training systems. Advanced ballistics laboratories. Everything a modern sniper program could need. But Callahan was already thinking about what it wouldn't have. The mentorship, the patience, the human connection that no technology could replace. Impressive, isn't it? She turned to find Colonel Pierce walking toward her, a folder tucked under his arm. It's expensive, Callahan replied. Whether it's impressive depends on what we do with it. Pierce smiled slightly. Always the pragmatist. That's why Bradford picked you. Bradford picked me because I embarrassed his exercise and he didn't know what else to do with me. Bradford picked you because you're the best. Pierce stopped beside her. But that's not why I'm here. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's complicated. He handed her the folder. This came through classified channels this morning. Eyes only. Your eyes specifically. Callahan opened the folder and scanned its contents. Her expression, normally so controlled, flickered with something that might have been surprise. This is a deployment order. Yes. To Taiwan. The Taiwan Strait specifically. There's a situation developing. Chinese military exercises that are looking less like exercises and more like preparation for something else. Callahan looked up from the folder. You want me to deploy? Now, when we're just starting to build the academy? I don't want anything. This comes from much higher than me. Pierce met her eyes. They specifically requested you commander. By name. The Pentagon believes your skills may be needed if things escalate. What about my students? What about Vasquez and the other candidates? They'll continue training with the other instructors. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves has agreed to oversee the program in your absence. Callahan was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. When do I leave? 48 hours. She nodded slowly. Understood. Pierce hesitated as if there was something more he wanted to say. Commander, there's something else. Something that's not in that folder. What is it? Morrison. He's been reassigned to a support unit at Camp Pendleton. He'll still be here when you return. Pierce paused. If you return. Callahan's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting I might not come back? I'm suggesting that the Taiwan Strait is one of the most dangerous places on Earth right now. And you're being sent there specifically because the situation is so volatile that they need someone who can operate without technological support if everything goes wrong. Colonel, with respect, I've been operating in dangerous places for 30 years. I know, that's what worries me. Pierce straightened. Just come back, Commander. We need you here. Your students need you. He turned and walked away, leaving Callahan alone with her deployment orders and the weight of everything they represented. The news of Callahan's deployment spread through the training facility like wildfire. Private First Class Vasquez heard it from another candidate at breakfast. She pushed away from the table without finishing her meal and went looking for her mentor. She found Callahan at Range 7 shooting in the pre-dawn darkness, the same place they had first met. Ma'am. Callahan didn't lower her rifle. Private, you're supposed to be in morning formation. I know, I heard you're leaving. Callahan fired. The distant target rang with impact. Word travels fast. Is it true? Are you going to Taiwan? Somewhere in that region. The specifics are classified. Vasquez stepped closer. For how long? Unknown. Could be weeks, could be months, could be... Callahan paused. Unknown. You were going to say forever, weren't you? You might not come back. Callahan finally lowered her rifle and turned to face her. That's always a possibility in this line of work. You know that. But you just started building the academy. You were supposed to train us. You were supposed to... Private. Callahan's voice was gentle but firm. When your country calls you, answer. That's the job. That's what we signed up for. Vasquez's jaw tightened. What happens to us? The candidates. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves will take over your training. He's excellent. He taught me once upon a time. He's not you. No, he's not. But he's good enough. Callahan paused. And you're good enough to succeed without me. You proved that during the exercise. I'm not ready. You're more ready than you think. Callahan reached into her pocket and withdrew something small and metallic. I want you to have this. It was a bullet casing, brass polished from years of handling. What is this? The first round I ever fired with my husband. Training day 1993. Danny kept it as a memento. He gave it to me on our wedding day. Callahan pressed it into Vasquez's palm. He said it reminded him that everyone starts somewhere. Everyone begins as a beginner. Vasquez stared at the casing. I can't take this. This is too important. That's exactly why you should have it. To remind you that skill can be learned. Confidence can be built. The only thing you can't teach is heart, and you already have that. Vasquez's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Ma'am, don't thank me. Just train hard. Get better. Make me proud. Callahan smiled slightly. And when I come back, I expect you to be the best shooter in the academy. When you come back. When? Callahan's voice was firm. I always come back. She slung her rifle over her shoulder and walked toward the training facility, leaving Vasquez standing in the darkness with a brass casing in her palm and a new determination burning in her chest. 24 hours before deployment, Callahan received an unexpected visitor. She was in her quarters packing her gear when a knock sounded on her door. It's open. The door swung inward. Derek Morrison stood on the threshold. Callahan's hands stilled on the rifle case she was preparing. She hadn't seen Morrison since the ceremony 3 weeks ago. He looked different now, thinner, older. The arrogance that had defined him seemed to have evaporated, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Sergeant Morrison, she said. His reduction in rank was still new enough to sting. Commander. He remained in the doorway, uncertain. May I come in? That depends. Are you here to threaten me again? Morrison flinched. No, ma'am. I'm here to... He started again. I heard you're deploying. Tomorrow. News travels fast. I wanted to talk to you before you left, if that's okay. Callahan studied him for a long moment. The man before her bore little resemblance to the aggressive bully who had confronted her in the dining facility. This man was broken, humbled, stripped of the identity he had built his entire life around. Come in, she said finally. Close the door. Morrison entered and stood at attention, his hands clasped behind his back. At ease, Sergeant. This isn't an official visit. He relaxed slightly, but his posture remained tense. Commander, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, what I did, who I was. And I don't like the man I was. His voice cracked slightly. I spent my entire career believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. Physical strength, aggression, dominance. I thought that's what made a warrior. And now I know I was wrong. Morrison met her eyes. You showed me that. Not just by being better than me, though God knows you are, but by how you responded when you could have destroyed me. Callahan said nothing, waiting for him to continue. When I was trapped in that canyon watching my team fall apart, you could have let Red Force take us. Nobody would have blamed you. I'd threatened you. I'd tried to ruin your career. I deserved to fail. But you didn't fail. Because you saved me. Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper now. You saved a man who hated you, who tried to hurt you, who represented everything that's wrong with military culture. I didn't save you because you deserved it, Callahan said quietly. I saved you because that's the job. We protect our own, even the ones who don't deserve protection. That's exactly what I mean. Morrison stepped closer. That's what real strength looks like. Not bullying, not intimidation, but the discipline to do the right thing even when it's hard, even when the other person doesn't deserve it. Callahan turned back to her packing. What do you want from me? Sergeant, absolution, I already gave you that. You apologized. I accepted. We're done. I don't want absolution. I want... He hesitated. I want to learn. She stopped packing. Learn what, how to be the kind of warrior you are. how to be strong without being cruel, how to lead without dominating. Morrison's voice steadied. I know I've been reassigned. I know my career in Force Recon is over, but that doesn't mean my career is over. That doesn't mean I can't become someone better. Callahan turned to face him fully. Do you know what the hardest thing about becoming better is? What? It's not the training. It's not the discipline. It's admitting that you were wrong in the first place. That takes more courage than any combat operation. She paused. You've already done the hardest part. So there's hope for me. There's hope for everyone who's willing to change. Callahan reached into her gear bag and pulled out a book. It was worn dog-eared, clearly read hundreds of times. This was my husband's, his training journal. Everything he learned about shooting, about leadership, about being a warrior. It's all in here. She held it out to Morrison. He stared at it like it might explode. I can't take that. You can. And you will. Callahan pressed it into his hands. Consider it a loan. Read it while I'm deployed. Learn from it. And when I come back, I want you to tell me what you've discovered. Why are you doing this? After everything I did to you? Callahan smiled slightly. Because holding grudges is exhausting. Because everyone deserves a second chance. And because my husband would have wanted me to help someone who genuinely wants to improve. Morrison clutched the journal to his chest. Thank you, Commander. I won't let you down. Don't thank me yet. That journal contains some of the hardest lessons I've ever learned. Finishing it will change you. Whether you're ready for that change remains to be seen. She returned to her packing. Now get out of my quarters, Sergeant. I have a deployment to prepare for. Morrison came to attention and saluted. Ma'am, good luck out there. Luck, out. He turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Callahan stared at the closed door for a long moment. Then she returned to her packing, her mind already shifting to the challenges that lay ahead. The flight to the Western Pacific took 18 hours. Callahan spent most of it reviewing intelligence briefings and studying maps of the Taiwan Strait. The situation was worse than the public knew. Chinese naval forces had been conducting increasingly aggressive exercises. Electronic warfare capabilities were being tested against American surveillance systems. Satellite communications in the region were becoming unreliable. It was she realized exactly the kind of environment she had trained for. High-tech systems failing. Traditional skills becoming essential. When the transport touched down at a classified forward operating base, she was met by a Navy captain with tired eyes and a worried expression. Commander Callahan, I'm Captain Harold Simmons. Welcome to the end of the world. That bad. Getting worse by the hour. Chinese forces are massing on the mainland. Our electronic surveillance capabilities are being systematically degraded. We've lost 3 reconnaissance drones in the last week. They fly into jamming zones and never come out. What do you need from me? Simmons handed her a tablet showing a tactical display. There's an island. Small, technically disputed territory. We have intelligence suggesting the Chinese are planning to use it as a staging area for a larger operation. We need eyes on that island. Human eyes, not electronic ones. You want me to conduct reconnaissance? I want you to get close enough to confirm whether our intelligence is accurate. If there's a buildup happening, we need to know. If not, we need to know that too. Callahan studied the display. The island was 40 miles from the nearest friendly position, surrounded by hostile waters, within range of Chinese surface-to-air missiles. This is a one-way mission if something goes wrong. I know. Simmons met her eyes. That's why we requested you specifically. You're the best chance we have of getting actionable intelligence without starting a war. And if I'm compromised, then you're on your own. We can't risk a rescue operation in contested airspace. Simmons paused. I won't order you to do this, Commander. It's too dangerous for an order. I'm asking. Callahan looked at the display for a long moment. 40 miles of hostile territory. No backup. No extraction guarantee. Just her skills, her rifle, and her instincts. It was, she realized, exactly the kind of mission Danny would have taken without hesitation. When do I leave? Tonight, 2200 hours, submarine insertion. I'll need to assemble my kit. Everything you need is waiting in the equipment bay. We've been preparing for your arrival. Simmons extended his hand. Good luck, Commander, and thank you. Callahan shook it. Don't thank me yet, Captain. Thank me when I come back with your intelligence. The submarine surfaced at 0300 hours, 5 miles from the target island. Callahan slipped into the black water wearing a closed-circuit rebreather and began her approach. The swim took 2 hours. 2 hours of complete darkness, of trusting her compass, and her training of moving through hostile waters with nothing but her skills to protect her. She reached the island's shoreline just before dawn and found a concealed position in the rocks above the beach. The intelligence was accurate. Chinese military personnel were everywhere. Vehicles, equipment, communications arrays. This wasn't a training exercise. This was preparation for something much larger. She spent the day observing, documenting, photographing with the small camera built into her scope. Every detail mattered. Every piece of information could make the difference between preventing a war and stumbling into one. As night fell, she prepared to transmit her findings via burst communication. A 3-second transmission, heavily encrypted, directed at a satellite that would relay the intelligence back to American command. She keyed the transmitter. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. The jamming was stronger than expected. Her communications were blocked. Callahan forced herself to remain calm. This was exactly the scenario she had trained for. Technology fails. Operators adapt. She had 2 options. Stay on the island and wait for the jamming to lift, which might never happen, or exfiltrate with her intelligence and find a way to transmit from farther out. She chose option 2. But as she began her descent toward the beach, a voice behind her froze her blood. Don't move. The words were in English. American English. She turned slowly, her hands raised. A figure emerged from the darkness. Male, tall, wearing the distinctive camouflage of American Special Forces. But his weapon was pointed at her chest. Who are you? He demanded. Commander Margaret Callahan, Naval Special Warfare. I'm here on authorized reconnaissance. Prove it. My identification is in my vest pocket. Left side. The man approached cautiously, his weapon never wavering. He reached into her pocket and withdrew her military ID. He studied it for a long moment, then he lowered his weapon. Son of a bitch, he said. You're the widow. Callahan blinked. How do you know that name? Because I trained at DevGru in 2012. You were my instructor. The man pulled off his night vision goggles, revealing a face she recognized despite the years. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen. You probably don't remember me. I remember everyone I train. Callahan's heart rate began to slow. You were the one who couldn't hit a target at 400 meters until I adjusted your trigger discipline. Chen laughed softly. That's me. You saved my career, Commander. And now, he gestured at the island around them. It looks like I might get to return the favor. What are you doing here? Same thing you are, reconnaissance. My team was inserted 3 days ago. We've been gathering intelligence on the Chinese buildup. Your team? 4 operators. We're set up on the north side of the island. Chen holstered his weapon. We've been trying to transmit for 2 days. Jamming's too strong. I know, I just tried. Then we're all stuck. Unless... Chen paused. Unless we can find a way to punch through the interference. Callahan's mind was already racing through possibilities. The jamming has to have a source, equipment probably mobile. If we can locate it and destroy it, we can open a communication window. We've been looking for it, no luck so far. Then maybe you've been looking the wrong way. Callahan pulled out her scope and began scanning the island's terrain. Jamming equipment generates heat, needs power, creates electromagnetic signatures. We just need to know what to look for. And you know what to look for. I spent 2 hours during Operation Ghost Wind hunting exactly this kind of equipment. 4 emitters, all hidden, all destroyed. Callahan smiled grimly. This is what I do, Staff Sergeant. This is exactly what I do. Chen stared at her with something that might have been awe. Commander, I always knew you were good, But I didn't know you were this good. You didn't need to know, that's the point. Callahan lowered her scope. Take me to your team. We have work to do. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, two shadows among shadows, invisible to the enemy forces that surrounded them. Chen's team was waiting at a concealed position overlooking the island's northern shore. 4 operators, all experienced, all tired, all relieved to see reinforcements, even if that reinforcement was a single 54-year-old woman. This is Commander Callahan, Chen announced. She's going to help us find the jamming source and open a communication window. The team leader, a master sergeant named Rodriguez, stepped forward. Ma'am, I've heard of you. Operation Ghost Wind. Word travels. Word travels when someone eliminates 28 targets in 2 hours. Rodriguez gestured at the island below. We've counted approximately 300 Chinese military personnel. Significant equipment. Looks like the staging area for an amphibious operation. That matches my assessment. Do you have a map of the island? Rodriguez produced a tablet showing a detailed topographical display. Callahan studied it, her mind working through the possibilities. Jamming equipment needs power, significant power. On an island this size, that means generators, large ones. She traced a line across the display. There's a natural depression here in the center of the island, protected from observation on all sides. That's where I'd put a command post. We scouted that area yesterday, didn't see anything. Did you scout it from above or below? Rodriguez hesitated. Below. The terrain made it too risky to approach from the high ground. Then you missed it. Jamming arrays are usually elevated for maximum broadcast range. They'd be on the ridgeline above the depression, camouflaged to blend with the terrain. How do you know this? Because I've been hunting electronic warfare equipment for 30 years. Callahan handed back the tablet. I'll go. Alone. The rest of you maintain position and be ready to transmit the moment the jamming lifts. Ma'am, with respect, you can't take out a fortified position by yourself. I don't need to take it out. I just need to disable the equipment long enough for a transmission. Callahan checked her rifle. Give me 2 hours. If you don't hear from me, assume I've failed and proceed with alternative extraction. Rodriguez looked at Chen. Chen shrugged. I've seen what she can do. If anyone can pull this off, it's her. Rodriguez turned back to Callahan. 2 hours, Commander. Good luck. Callahan moved into the darkness. I don't need luck, she said quietly. I never miss. The approach took 45 minutes. Callahan moved through the terrain with the patience of a predator, using every shadow, every contour, every natural feature to mask her presence. Chinese patrols passed within meters of her position. She remained motionless, invisible, a ghost among the living. She found the jamming array exactly where she predicted, a cluster of sophisticated equipment hidden beneath camouflage netting on the ridgeline above the central depression. 2 guards, both alert, both armed. She studied them through her scope, calculating angles, measuring distances. 2 shots, 2 kills. That's all it would take. But this wasn't an exercise. These were real people, real lives. She pushed the thought aside. This was the mission. This was what she was trained for. She settled into position, her breathing slowing to the familiar rhythm that preceded every shot. The first guard stepped into her crosshairs. She exhaled. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle coughed once the suppressed shot, barely audible. The guard dropped. His partner spun, searching for the threat. Too slow. Callahan's second shot took him before he could raise an alarm. She moved quickly now, crossing the distance to the jamming equipment in seconds. She didn't have time to destroy it. That would require explosives she didn't have. But she could disable it. She found the main power coupling and severed it with her knife. The equipment went dark. Immediately, her radio crackled to life. Phoenix, this is Overwatch. We have a clear signal. Transmitting now. Confirmed Overwatch. Get that intelligence out. I'm heading to the extraction point. Copy. Be advised, enemy patrols are converging on your position. They detected the equipment failure. Understood. I'll handle it. She began moving toward the northern shore, toward Chen's team, toward extraction. Behind her, alarms began to sound across the island. The hunt was on. The alarms screamed across the island like wounded animals. Callahan moved through the darkness with the speed of desperation. Behind her, searchlights swept the terrain. Voices shouted in Mandarin. The sound of boots on rock echoed from every direction. She had maybe 10 minutes before they found her. "Phoenix, this is Chen. What's your position?" "Half a click south of your location. Heavy pursuit." "We can see them. At least 30 hostiles converging on your area." 30. Against one 54-year-old woman with a rifle and a knife. The odds weren't in her favor, but they never had been. Chen listened carefully. "If I don't reach extraction point in 15 minutes, leave without me." "Negative, Commander. We don't leave people behind." "That's an order, Staff Sergeant. The intelligence we gathered is more important than any individual. Get it back to command. That's the mission." Static crackled. Then Chen's voice heavy with reluctance. "Understood. 15 minutes." Callahan clicked off her radio and focused on survival. The terrain was against her. Open ground between her position and the northern shore. Limited cover. Multiple patrol routes intersecting her escape path. She needed a distraction. She pulled a flare from her vest emergency signal last resort and hurled it toward the eastern ridge. It ignited in midair, bathing the terrain in harsh red light. The searchlight swung toward the flare. Callahan ran. Her legs burned with every stride. Her lungs screamed for air. But she kept moving, kept pushing, kept fighting against the limitations of a body that had served her faithfully for 54 years. She was 200 meters from the extraction point when the first bullet cracked past her head. She dove behind a boulder, rolling into cover as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. They had her pinned. "Phoenix, we see you. 3 shooters on your left, 2 on your right. You're surrounded." "I noticed." "We're coming to get you." "Negative. Stay at extraction. Prepare for departure." "Commander." "That's an order." Callahan assessed her situation. 5 shooters, limited ammunition, no clear escape route, but she had something they didn't: experience. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the pattern of gunfire. The shooters were coordinated but predictable. They fired in sequence, covering each other's reloads. A classic fire and maneuver pattern. Classic meant predictable. She waited for the sequence to cycle. 3 shots from the left. Pause. 2 shots from the right. Pause. In that pause, she moved. She burst from cover, sprinting toward a cluster of rocks 10 meters closer to the shore. Bullets chased her heels, but she was faster, throwing herself into the new cover, just as the shooters acquired her position. "She's moving, cut her off." She didn't wait for them to reposition. She raised her rifle, found the first shooter in her scope, and fired. The man dropped. She shifted targets. Second shooter, fired. Another kill. The remaining 3 went to ground, suddenly aware that they were facing someone who could shoot back with lethal precision. "Who the hell is that?" one of them shouted in accented English. "Someone you shouldn't have cornered," Callahan muttered. She moved again, using their hesitation against them. Another 10 meters gained. Another position of cover secured. The extraction point was 50 meters away now. She could see Chen's team waiting at the waterline, their submarine surfacing like a dark whale in the pre-dawn light. 50 meters. An eternity under fire. The remaining 3 shooters recovered their nerve and opened up simultaneously. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around her, showering her with stone fragments. She couldn't move. Any direction she ran would expose her to crossfire. She was trapped. Phoenix status. Pinned. 50 meters out. Can't advance. Silence on the radio. Then Chen's voice, tight with determination. "Covering fire in 10 seconds on my mark run." "Chen, no. You'll expose your position." "With respect, Commander, you don't outrank me enough to stop me from saving your life." 9 seconds. Callahan gritted her teeth. The boy was going to get himself killed. 8, 7, 6. She braced herself, every muscle coiled for the sprint of her life. 5, 4, 3. The shooters adjusted their aim, anticipating her next move. 2, 1. Mark. Chen's team opened fire from the shoreline, precise coordinated bursts that forced the enemy shooters into cover. Callahan ran. 50 meters of open ground, the longest 50 meters of her life. Bullets cracked around her, but Chen's covering fire was relentless, keeping the enemy suppressed. 40 meters. 30. 20. She hit the waterline at full sprint, her boots splashing through the shallows. Hands grabbed her Chen, and Rodriguez hauling her toward the submarine. Go, go, go! They plunged into the water together, swimming for the submarine's open hatch. Behind them, the island erupted with gunfire. Tracers lit the dawn sky. But they were too far now, moving too fast. Callahan reached the submarine and hauled herself through the hatch. Chen followed. Rodriguez, the rest of the team. Seal the hatch. Dive, dive. The submarine's hull groaned as it descended into the protective darkness of the ocean. They had made it. The return journey took 36 hours. Callahan spent most of it in the submarine's cramped medical bay, having her minor injuries treated and writing her after-action report. The intelligence they had gathered was transmitted ahead of them. By the time they reached American waters, the Pentagon had already adjusted its Taiwan strategy based on what she had observed. Chen visited her on the second day at sea. "Commander, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck and then dragged behind it for a few miles." Callahan managed a tired smile. "But I'll live." "You more than lived. You completed the mission, single-handedly disabled their jamming network and eliminated hostile combatants while evading a pursuit force of 30 personnel. I had help. Your covering fire saved my life. My covering fire wouldn't have mattered if you hadn't made it that far in the first place." Chen sat down across from her. "Commander, I've been in special operations for 12 years. I've worked with the best operators in the world, but I've never seen anyone do what you did on that island. I just did what was necessary. You did what was impossible, at 54 years old, alone, in hostile territory." Chen shook his head slowly. "When I trained with you at DevGru, I thought you were just a good instructor. Now I understand you were the real thing all along. You just never needed to prove it." "I never wanted to prove it. Proving yourself is for people who aren't sure what they're capable of. And you've always known." Callahan was quiet for a moment. "My husband knew. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He spent years helping me find it. By the time he died, I knew exactly who I was and what I could do." She paused. "The hard part was learning to live with that knowledge. Power is a burden when you understand its true weight." Chen absorbed this in silence. "Commander, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you keep training people after your husband died? Why didn't you take field assignments with your skills? You could have been the most decorated operator in Special Forces history." Callahan looked at her hands, the weathered, calloused hands of a shooter. "Because Danny asked me to. The last thing he said to me before he died in my arms. He said, finish the training. He believed that teaching was more important than fighting, that creating other operators was more valuable than being one yourself. Do you believe that I do now?" Callahan met his eyes. "Every shot I teach someone to make, every technique I pass on, every student who becomes a better warrior because of what I showed them, that's my legacy. Not my kills, not my medals, the people I've helped become." Chen nodded slowly. "Then I hope you know you've created a lot of legacies, including mine." He stood and offered his hand. Callahan took it. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant, for coming back for me. You would have done the same." "I would have. That's why I trained you to do it too." Chen smiled and walked out of the medical bay. Callahan leaned back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes. For the first time in a very long time, she felt at peace. The submarine surfaced at Pearl Harbor 3 days later. Callahan was greeted at the dock by a delegation that included Captain Simmons, 2 Navy admirals, and a civilian in an expensive suit who didn't introduce himself. "Commander Callahan." The senior admiral stepped forward, his face grave. "The intelligence you gathered has been invaluable. The President has personally authorized a commendation for your actions." "Thank you, sir, but I had help. Staff Sergeant Chen and his team deserve equal recognition." "They'll receive it." The admiral paused. However, there's another matter we need to discuss, privately. He gestured toward a waiting vehicle. Callahan followed him, her instincts warning her that this conversation wasn't going to be simple. In the back of the vehicle, the civilian finally spoke. "Commander, my name is Harrison Webb. I work for the National Security Council. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level." Callahan said nothing, waiting. "The intelligence you gathered has confirmed our worst fears about Chinese intentions toward Taiwan. We believe a military operation is imminent, not years away, but months, possibly weeks." "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Webb leaned forward. "The Joint Special Operations Sniper Academy you were building, it's been accelerated. We need trained operators now, not in 5 years. The Pentagon wants you to take command immediately and fast-track the first class of students." "That's impossible. Proper sniper training takes months. You can't rush it without compromising quality." "We don't have months, Commander. We have what we have." Webb's expression was hard. "The question is whether you can work with that reality or whether we need to find someone who can." Callahan's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to cut corners, to graduate students who aren't ready. That will get people killed. People are going to die regardless. The question is how many." Webb held her gaze. "Commander, I'm not asking you to produce perfect operators. I'm asking you to produce operators who are good enough to make a difference. That's all any of us can do." The Admiral spoke up. "Commander, we're not ordering you to do this. We're asking. If you believe it's impossible, say so, and we'll find another way." Callahan stared out the window at the naval base passing by. Sailors going about their duties, ships preparing for deployment, the machinery of war spinning up for a conflict that might be inevitable. She thought about Vasquez, about Morrison, about all the students she had trained over the years. She thought about Danny and his last words. "Finish the training." "I'll do it," she said finally. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I select my own students. No political appointments, no favors. Only people with genuine potential." "Agreed." "Second, I run the program my way. No interference from Washington. No bureaucrats telling me how to train warriors." "Agreed." "Third," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I want Derek Morrison." The Admiral blinked. "The Marine you disciplined, the one who tried to destroy your career." "The same. He has talent. Raw, undisciplined, but real. And he's spent the last month reading my husband's training journal. I think he's ready to learn." Webb exchanged a glance with the Admiral. "That's an unusual request." "I'm an unusual person." Callahan met their eyes. "Morrison represents everything that's wrong with military culture. Arrogance, prejudice, the assumption that strength is the only thing that matters. If I can turn him into a real operator, I can turn anyone into one." The Admiral considered this. "You believe he can change. I believe everyone can change, given the right motivation." Callahan's voice hardened. "And right now, the motivation is war. Nothing clarifies the mind like the prospect of death." Webb nodded slowly. "All right, Commander. You have your conditions. Now get to work. We're running out of time." The Joint Special Operations Sniper Academy opened 6 weeks later. Callahan stood on the main platform looking out at her first class of students. 30 candidates from all branches of service. Navy SEALs, Marine Scout snipers, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Tactics. And in the back row, standing at rigid attention, Derek Morrison. "Ladies and gentlemen," Callahan began, "welcome to the hardest training you will ever experience. Some of you will not finish. Some of you will question why you started. All of you will learn things about yourselves that you never knew before." She walked slowly along the platform, making eye contact with each candidate. "I'm going to teach you to shoot, to stalk, to survive in conditions that would kill ordinary people. But more importantly, I'm going to teach you to think. Because the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is not a rifle. It's a trained mind." She stopped in front of Morrison. "Some of you know me by reputation. Some of you have heard stories. Let me make one thing clear. Everything you've heard is probably true. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've trained operators on 4 continents. I've made shots that experts said were impossible." She paused. But I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to prepare you for what's coming. And what's coming? Her voice dropped. What's coming is going to test everything you believe about yourself. She turned back to the full group. Today, you're candidates. Hopefuls. People who think they might have what it takes. By the end of this program, you'll know for certain. Either you'll be operators ready to face any challenge, or you'll wash out and return to your regular units. She climbed back onto the platform. There's no shame in washing out. Not everyone is built for this work. But there is shame in not giving everything you have, in holding back, in letting fear or doubt or ego keep you from your potential. Her eyes found Vasquez standing in the front row. Private First Class Vasquez, step forward. Vasquez approached the platform, her face nervous but determined. Private Vasquez was a struggling candidate when I first met her. Her shooting scores were mediocre. Her confidence was shattered, but she had something that can't be taught: heart. Callahan reached into her pocket and withdrew the brass casing she had given Vasquez weeks ago. She returned this to me when I got back from deployment. She said she didn't need it anymore. She said she'd found her own strength. She handed the casing back to Vasquez. Keep it, as a reminder of where you started, and as proof of how far you can go. Vasquez's eyes glistened. She took the casing, saluted, and returned to formation. Callahan addressed the group again. The path ahead is difficult. Many of you won't make it. But for those who do, for those who push through the pain and the doubt and the exhaustion, there's something waiting on the other side. She paused. Not glory, not fame, something better. The knowledge that you've become someone extraordinary, someone capable of protecting others, someone who can make a difference when everything else fails. She straightened. Training begins at Euro 500 tomorrow. Dismissed. The candidates dispersed. But Morrison lingered. He approached the platform slowly, his posture hesitant. Commander, may I speak with you? Callahan nodded. Go ahead, Sergeant. I finished the journal, your husband's training journal. And Morrison's voice was thick with emotion. It changed everything. The way I think about shooting, about leadership, about what it means to be a warrior. He paused. There's a passage near the end. He wrote it the night before his last mission. I know the one. He wrote, the best operators aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who learn from failure, who use it as fuel, who refuse to let a single defeat define them. Morrison met her eyes. That's what I want to be, Commander. Someone who learns, someone who grows, someone who refuses to let his mistakes define him. Callahan studied him for a long moment. You've changed, Morrison. The man I met in that dining facility wouldn't have said those words. That man was a fool. An arrogant, ignorant fool. Morrison's jaw tightened. I'm not him anymore. I don't want to be him anymore. Then prove it, not with words, with actions. Callahan stepped closer. This program is going to push you harder than anything you've ever experienced. You're going to fail, repeatedly. The question is what you do after you fail. I'll get up. I'll keep trying. I'll become what you need me to become. I don't need you to become anything for me. I need you to become something for yourself. She paused. And for the people who will depend on you when the shooting starts. Morrison nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Now get some rest. Tomorrow the real work begins. She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the fading light. 8 months later, Commander Margaret Callahan stood at the graduation ceremony for the first class of the Joint Special Operations Sniper Academy. 22 candidates had survived the program. 22 new operators trained to the highest standards, ready for whatever challenges awaited them. General Bradford flew in from Washington to present the certificates. This class represents the future of American Special Operations, he announced. Trained by the best, tested by the toughest program in military history, ready to serve wherever they're needed. He called each graduate forward. Private First Class Elena Vasquez, now Corporal Vasquez, received her certificate with tears in her eyes. Sergeant Derek Morrison received his with a steady hand and a clear gaze. When the ceremony was complete, Bradford approached Callahan privately. "Commander, you've done something remarkable here. 22 operators in 8 months, every one of them exceptional. They did the work. I just showed them the way. You showed them more than that. You showed them what's possible when someone believes in them." Bradford paused. "There's talk of expanding the program, additional facilities, larger classes. The Pentagon wants to make this the gold standard for sniper training worldwide. And they want me to run it. They want you to lead it. Not just train, lead." Callahan looked out at her graduates mingling with family members and fellow soldiers. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. The world's getting more dangerous. We need people like you." He walked away, leaving Callahan alone with her thoughts. Master Gunnery Sergeant Reeves found her later standing at the 1,000-yard range. "You're not at the party," he observed. "I'm not a party person." "No, you never were." Reeves stood beside her, looking out at the targets in the distance. "Danny would be proud, you know, of everything you've accomplished." "Would he?" "Absolutely. Not because of the missions or the medals, because you kept your promise. You finished the training. You passed it on." Reeves paused. That was always the most important thing to him. Legacy. Callahan reached into her pocket and withdrew her husband's rifle scope, the one she had carried on every mission for 13 years. "I've been thinking about retiring it," she said quietly. "Getting something newer, more advanced." "Why would you do that?" "Because maybe it's time to let go, to stop living in the past." She turned the scope over in her hands. "Danny's gone. He's been gone for 13 years. Carrying his scope won't bring him back." Reeves was quiet for a moment. "You're not carrying it to bring him back. You're carrying it to remember." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm carrying it because I'm afraid of who I'll be without it." "And who would that be?" Callahan looked at the scope, at the scratches that marked years of hard use, at the adjustments Danny had made with his own hands. "Someone new," she said finally. "Someone who's ready to move forward." She raised the scope to her eye and looked through it one last time. Then she lowered it and slipped it back into her pocket. "Not yet," she said, "but soon." The graduation celebration continued into the evening. Callahan circulated among her students, accepting congratulations, offering final words of advice. Each conversation reminded her why she did this work. Vasquez found her near the refreshment table. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for everything." "You don't need to thank me. You did the work. I wouldn't have done the work without you. That night on Range 7, you could have walked right past me. You could have ignored another struggling candidate, but you didn't." "I never ignore potential," Vasquez smiled. "That's what makes you different. You see people, not uniforms, not ranks, not ages, just people. It's the only way to teach, the only way to lead." Callahan paused. "Where are you being assigned?" "Taiwan. First deployment. I ship out next week." Callahan's expression flickered with something concerned pride, fear for a student heading into danger. "Be careful out there, Corporal. Remember your training. Trust your instincts." "I will." Vasquez hesitated. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever get scared before a mission, during a mission?" Callahan considered the question carefully. Everyone gets scared. Fear is natural, healthy. It keeps you alert, keeps you alive. She paused. The difference between a good operator and a great one isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do with it. Whether you let it control you or whether you use it as fuel. How do you use it as fuel? By remembering why you're there. By focusing on the mission. By trusting the training that got you through situations just like this 100 times before. Callahan's eyes met hers. "You're ready, Vasquez. More ready than you know." "Thank you, ma'am, for believing in me. Thank you for proving me right." They shook hands and Vasquez walked away to join her fellow graduates. Morrison approached next. "Commander?" "Sergeant, congratulations on your graduation." "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without... He stopped, started again. That's not true. I could have done it without you. But I wouldn't have. I would have quit, or failed, or found some excuse to give up. But you didn't. No. Because every time I wanted to quit, I remembered that night in the dining facility. I remembered who I was, who I didn't want to be anymore. Morrison's voice steadied. You gave me a second chance, Commander. Not many people get that. I'm not going to waste it. See that you don't. Callahan's voice softened slightly. You have real talent, Morrison. Always did. You just needed to get out of your own way. I'm still working on that. We all are. Every day. For the rest of our lives. She paused. Where are you being assigned? Training Command. They want me to help develop the next generation of reconnaissance Marines. Morrison smiled grimly. Apparently, someone told them I understood what it means to learn from failure. Smart recommendation. Whoever made it. It was you, wasn't it? You recommended me. Callahan didn't confirm or deny. She simply said, teach them well, Sergeant. Pass on what you've learned. That's how we honor the people who trained us. I will, Commander, I promise. He saluted, and she returned it. Then he walked away, joining the other graduates heading toward their futures. Callahan stood alone as the party wound down around her. Reeves appeared at her side one final time. What are you going to do now? I don't know. Bradford wants me to expand the program, lead a new generation of trainers. And what do you want? Callahan looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I want to keep teaching. Keep passing on what Danny taught me. Keep showing people that they're capable of more than they believe. Then do that. Nobody's stopping you. I'm 54 years old, Reeves. How many more years do I have left? Enough. More than enough. Reeves put a hand on her shoulder. You proved that on that island. Age is just a number. What matters is what you do with the time you have. Callahan nodded slowly. Danny used to say something similar. He said the best operators don't count their years, they count their contributions. Smart man. The smartest I ever knew. Callahan reached into her pocket and touched the rifle scope. Maybe it's time I started counting contributions instead of limitations. That sounds like a plan. She turned to face him. Thank you, Reeves. For everything. For 40 years of service. For being a mentor when I needed one. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You never needed me to believe in you. You always had enough faith for both of us. Reeves smiled. But I'm glad I got to watch. It's been one hell of a ride. They shook hands, two old warriors, at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The next morning, Commander Margaret Callahan returned to the 1,000-yard range. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The range was empty, silent, waiting. She set up her position with the practiced efficiency of 30 years. Rifle balanced, breathing controlled, eyes fixed on the distant target. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The mess hall confrontation, the exercise, the island mission, the students she had trained, the lives she had changed. She thought about Danny and his final words. Finish the training. They need you. She had finished the training. She had passed it on. She had created a legacy that would outlive her by generations. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Not ever. She settled into the familiar rhythm. Exhale. Steady. Squeeze. The shot rang out across the desert. Distant ping of metal on metal. Dead center. She chambered another round. In the end, they had called her old. They had called her weak. They had surrounded her in that dining facility and threatened to end her career. They had been wrong. Because Margaret Callahan was not defined by her age, her appearance, or other people's expectations. She was defined by her choices, her training, her unshakable determination to be the best version of herself. And she never missed. She fired again. Another hit. The sun rose higher. The day began. The future stretched out before her, filled with challenges yet to come and students yet to train. She would face it all. Every obstacle, every doubt, every moment of pain and exhaustion and fear, because that was who she was. That was what she did. She was Commander Margaret Callahan, the widow, the legend. And her story was far from over. She rose from her shooting position, slung her rifle across her back, and walked toward the training facility. Behind her, the targets stood in perfect rows, marked with the holes of her flawless shooting. Ahead of her, a new class of candidates was waiting to be transformed. She smiled. "Let's get to work."